roll call. Mayor Ocober.
Here.
Councilman Clement. Councilwoman Gavin.
Here.
Councilman Guerrero.
Here.
Councilman Hug, absent. Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Budron.
Here.
Councilwoman Coleman.
Here.
Councilwoman Reardon.
Here.
First on the agenda this evening is citizens to be heard on agenda items. Is there anyone that would like to speak on an agenda item this evening? Seeing none?
Up this one.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Here to talk about Ordinance 504-22, the new residential ordinance getting single-family homes registered. It's been a long haul. It's been over 10 years, more time, maybe 11, 12 years, whatever. Depends who you talk to. It's been an uphill battle for both sides. I mean, there's people on either side that don't feel that they've got everything in there that they would like to see. I, for one, think there should be some other changes. I'm quite sure the landlords feel the same way. But one thing I learned in negotiations, that when both sides feel like they've been, search your own word, then it must have been a good negotiations, because both sides of the table feel they walked away and they didn't get what they want. Cunningham Neighborhood Council is in full support of the ordinance for single-family rental property. I think it's gonna be beneficial not only to the neighborhood, people have to deal with this problem all the time, and us as leaders in the community, but it's also a situation for the police and everybody else associated with the crime that goes on in these single-family homes and the problems that we've had over the years. So I would ask the council to do some soul searching and please vote for this passage of the bill tomorrow night. I won't be able to make it, that's why I'm here tonight. But I'm asking you to have full support for the bill that's going to be presented, for the ordinance to be presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Barry McHugh, I'm representing Kappa and myself on the single-family rental ordinance that's coming up in front of you. Joliet owes the people who live here a decent place to live, a house, a rental that meets the minimum requirements of safety and health. You can't have unworking plumbing, holes in the walls. This ordinance will ensure that the people who live, the residents who are here, have a decent place to live that meets a minimum requirement. This is necessary for doing that. A lot of landlords do a great job, but when you get down to where people are living in substandard housing, that in itself creates problems. If you give people some place where they can live and raise their family with some hope, some a decent place, they'll do better. This is good for Joliet because it's good for the residents in Joliet. This has been going on for a number of years. Everybody knows that we passed it back, you passed it back and forth amongst everybody. Tell the residents where you stand on this. Who do you support on this? You support the people who are probably, and this primarily affects those of us who are most vulnerable. Who do you support? The ones who are most vulnerable or the ones who aren't? So I recommend that you vote for this. I recommend you approve it. And if you can't approve it, say why you can't. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll have the city manager review tomorrow's items.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Agenda item 499-22, award a contract for the purchase of ammonia analyzers for the West Side Ausable Water Waste Treatment Plants to Gastova and Associates in the amount of $57,650. Agenda item 522, amendment number 1 to the professional services contract for the design, permit drafting for the Chicago Street Water Main Improvement Project to Civil Tech Engineering in the amount of $82,972.10. Agenda item 501-22, change order number 1 in the amount of $158,000 It's $6.61, and final payout in the amount of $258,103.36 for the Essington Road and West Jefferson Street Interceptor Sewer Project to Len Cox and Sons Excavating. Agenda item 503-22. An ordinance approving a vacation of portions of McKinley Avenue, Edward Street, and Lawton Avenue and adjacent alleys. This is in regards to the East Side Water Treatment Plant. We've acquired properties going along that particular stretch of road, vacant properties, so we can expand that wastewater treatment plant. And this is to vacate the alleys that separate them, so we'll have one long continuous piece of property. Agenda item 504-22, ordinance amending Chapter 8, Article 1, Division 15, Section 8-152, rental registration certificate required at ordinance, the City of Joliet Code of Ordinances, to include single-family residences. Item number 506-22, a resolution requesting authorization to enter a regular 2022 Justice Assistant Grant intergovernmental agreement between the City of Joliet and Will County. This is a grant that we share with the Will County Sheriff's Department. It is split 50-50 between the City of Joliet and the Will County Sheriff's Department. We will get approximately $29,980.50, the City of Joliet, for law enforcement purposes. And last but not least is 507-22, a resolution supporting the continued efforts to resolve public safety concerns with the Safety Act. And with that would conclude the agenda items.
Eric, yeah, in a moment. Jim, on the single-family rental, we're not changing the ordinance as it exists. We're just adding the single family to it?
I believe that's the line share. I think we're only having right now, I think one of the things, this is we're mirroring an ordinance that's very similar to the one in Aurora that has. Ours is a little bit less stringent on the landlords. It's $100 per landlord, not $100 per property as it originally was. For an inspection. But yes, this is, we're amending our ordinance just a bit to grab those single-family homes that are being rented out.
Right, well, we have a lot of them. Now, the way I read it, maybe I'm mistaken, I thought it was a $100 fee for each landlord to sign up, and it's $50 per property or unit.
I believe so. No, go ahead. I believe it's, go ahead, Mr. Regis. I believe it's.
Hi, everyone. That was an earlier draft that had a $50 per resident fee in it. For the draft that's being presented to council tonight, that has been removed because we do an inspection fee anyhow. So it's only, each landlord would have to register once a year, pay $100, and give us a list of their properties. Then separate, distinct from this, when they get inspected, there's an inspection fee. So we removed that $50 per household fee on there because there's already another fee in place.
And what is the inspection fee currently?
It varies. It's generally, the minimum is $100 generally, and it can go up if you have more properties on the list.
And it also goes up if you have to continue to come back if they have violations, correct, to the charge?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and are we rolling, how many single families, do we have an estimate? I don't mean accurate, but how many single family rentals do we have?
We've heard a lot of estimates over the years. The estimate hovers at around 5,000, but the real answer is we really have no idea. We just don't know because they're not required to register.
And Chris, right, and that 5,000, is that just single family estimate or rentals in general? Apartments and for single family?
Single family estimate.
Is 5,000, which would be,
But again, I wouldn't really put a lot of stock in that number because there's no good data.
and do we have some kind of, I'm sure, all the good landlords will sign up for the program, but somebody could try to fly below the radar, right? Is there a penalty if they're caught not registering?
It's written into the ordinance that, and it codifies existing ordinance, they can be fined up to $750 per day per violation if they are not in compliance with this ordinance.
Okay, and the last question I had, we're not phasing this in, say, over a period of years, we're gonna do it all at once.
Implementation still needs to be kind of addressed by city staff. We all agree that we can implement this, and we would implement it at once, but it's not realistic to imagine that every property would be inspected all right away. It's in the existing ordinance already that provisional certificates can be issued pending final inspection, so that would probably be the best way to roll it out. But yes, we do plan to roll it out all at once initially, but there will be some catch-up time built in.
So we don't really, since we don't have an accurate estimate on the single-family homes, we don't really have an estimate on how many employees would have to be doing this and how many new ones would have to be hired yet.
No, we don't know that, and let's also be clear that it's not our intention to force landlords to sit on vacant properties while they're waiting for their inspections. We're gonna try to keep everybody rolling, keep everything going as is, and we're going to implement these inspections over time as best we can do it.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Question?
Yes.
Chris, did I hear you correct that if a landlord has multiple units, it is still just one $100 fee?
Yes, the registration fee per landlord is the same for everyone. The inspection fee could be higher depending on the number of units, but they already know that now because they're already paying our current inspection fees. We're not changing that.
So I don't see where this ordinance does anything for the tenant issue. And I know a gentleman spoke about tenants need a good place to live, but aren't most of our complaints back to us from neighbors in regards to the tenants that are in a unit? And doesn't that go automatically in an inspection area if a landlord has complaints from the neighbors?
Yes and no. Sometimes the answer is yes. It'll go in the rental inspection program currently if there are violations. So not necessarily complaints. Everybody can just make up 3 different complaints and call in, and that's a disservice. It has to be violation-based to be placed in the current system. And as we know, that's an imperfect system. So we're trying to make it better for everyone.
Thank you.
Mayor, one more question. Chris, are you familiar? Is this an end of lease type inspection between the leases, or is this a yearly?
There are different schedules for inspections. Again, this is in the existing ordinance. We're not making this new. Let's say you get inspected and you have no violations, you can get a certificate for up to 5 years. It might be 5 years before you need another inspection if you have a good property. If there are a bunch of violations and they're not corrected in a timely fashion after re-inspections, you're going to be inspected more frequently. So it could be annually. I don't think we do more than annually, right?
No.
So yeah, if there's a chronic violation that's going to be annual, if you're in compliance, you could go out as many as 5 years without another inspection.
So if we feel, if under the ordinance there needs to be an inspection of a single-family rental, what if that same family's been living there for 8 years? We're gonna intrude on them to do the inspection?
We do that already.
And apartments?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Chris, at this time, we don't have a specific plan on how we're gonna enforce this, meaning what kind of manpower, how we're gonna pay for the manpower, how many people are gonna be hired, that type of thing.
You mean as far as, we know how we're going to enforce it, we don't know quite how we're going to implement it yet because we don't have the data right now. Unless we pass this, we will never, ever know how many single-family rentals there are in the city of Joliet. Without that number, nobody can sit here and tell you that, oh, we need X amount of employees to do this because there simply is no good data on that. So it becomes a circular argument then, because if we don't do this, we're never gonna have the answer. If you wanna say, well, I don't wanna do this until you have the answer, we're never going to have that answer, it's never going to happen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next would be public comments. Anyone would like to speak under public comments?
I would like to say that my name is Dan Condon, and I am against adding the single-family rental homes to the inspection program. Right now, the city of Joliet's inspecting 7,500 units across 2,500 properties, and that's apartments only. There's an estimate floating around of about 5,000 single-family rental homes. So you're taking it from managing 2,500 properties to 7,500 properties, which is a pretty significant swing. Seems kind of like overkill since there's already a system in place to add troubled properties to the rental inspection program. There's an app called Citizen View. Anyone can make a complaint on it. If you have 3 violations on the property, it gets put on rental inspection. City goes through it, does their thing. If you have no violations after a couple inspections, it gets pulled off, and then new properties get added on that have problems. Those really make sense to add 5,000 units to a system that is kind of there's already a system in place to address those issues. Seems like a lot of people touch that, there's crime in the city of Joliet, and that this program is magically going to fix it. Checking smoke alarms and grounded outlets isn't going to prevent crime or overcrowding or other complaints regarding people. It's only going to fix the building. So that's about all I have to say about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there anything else?
Good evening, I'm Fran Stevenson, and I live here in Joliet. However, I'd like to give a little bit of a realistic point of view, because I've experienced some of the changeover that happens with my parents' recent death. We have a family home that's not in Joliet, it's Moni, and my brother bought the house. And the village of Moni decided to harass him because he's not a in-town owner, basically. He lives in Virginia. But he comes in and he does his work, and he makes enough money that he can actually fix the home. Dad, before he died, didn't want to maintain it. He didn't feel well. We didn't know it at the time, but he died of end-stage kidney disease, so he really didn't feel like fixing the home. And so we had a furnace that didn't work, and we had a lot of other things that didn't work. And there are tenants in the home, and they didn't want to report things. I think partly because they didn't know what to do during the changeover. There wasn't anybody there, and Mom and Dad were sick, both of them, and so they didn't really know what to do. And then when my brother took over, he established a lot of social media connections and stuff like that, and started getting the fixes going on. By this time, the village of Moni had discovered that this house was really in kind of bad shape. And so they started kind of harassing him, and he's like, well, why don't they like me? Because I'm fixing it. But the thing is I've seen around in Joliet and around my neighborhood that not everybody has that kind of money. And so what happens when you have a home that hasn't been repaired, hasn't been well taken care of, and then somebody else moves into it because it's income producing property, it makes some sense. It's really not good for insurance. It's not good. The reputations kind of precede you, if you will. And even though you don't know those things that are going on, the relationships that are being had, you don't really know what's going on. And so I think it's a good idea for the city to inspect, at least initially. And I haven't read the actual text of what you're trying to do here, but I do know what they do with public inspections. And for example, as a renter, and I've been a renter all my life, in my own room in a multi-family unit, I live over at Center and Western, so that's an old building that's fallen into disrepair and has been helped a great deal by the people who own it. And I didn't personally know what a water leak looked like in a plaster wall. That's an old building. It's 1926 that it was built. And so I really didn't know what it looked like, and it wasn't until I reported a bed bug, which I had to learn how it looked like, and the maintenance man came in and says, oh my God, you've got a water leak. And I had no idea what that looked like. And so multiply that by a lot of people. I think there's a problem with that if we don't inspect. I think that, there's loser kind of landlords out there, but you know what? I'm not so sure that solves that problem because you still have a relationship to deal with, but I think it does keep it safe for the people who are actually living there. and deal with it on a daily basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next.
Good evening, Council. My name is Dr. Mark Wallace, and the landlord, been here for 25 years now. Time is going fast. But I wanted to share with you all a little bit of what we've talked about here all together as a kind of a collaborative group. Was that paper? Okay. If you would, I sent out a packet stapled that I want to share with everybody. And basically what this is the meat of the current rental program that we have going on as right now. And what we've done is we've looked at the input in regard to how complaints are coming in, what the process is in regard to moving through, to understand if there's any violations, and moving forward to what has to happen in the outcome of the properties. So this is actually an innovation to what is already initial right now. It's building on top of the establishment that we already have. If you go to the next page, what we want to do, and we've worked with neighborhood services to talk about these things, and also we've been sponsored by council members to find out a way to make this thing work. So we want to be able to have a landlord cooperative compliance. So landlords will work as agents with neighborhood services, perform self-audits instructed by neighborhood services, register each single family home on Joliet's neighborhood services website. As of right now, there is on the website, if a bank has a foreclosed property, they can go on to the website, and there's a form actually there right now that they can fill out. That information will automatically download itself into an Excel spreadsheet and it's already is dumped. So that is actually a working document that costs no money to maintain. These things were, and neighborhood services has after we go through this process of having these self-audits being done by the landlords, what we want to do is be able to give neighborhood services the opportunity of be able to determine if they need to audit their property or not. So actually we can get a lot done in a very short amount of time with very little cost. This came to me from when I worked at General Electric Medical Systems. I had a buy of $800 million around the world, and I could not always get to all my suppliers. And I worked for Jeff Immelt, and Jeff Immelt was right before Jack Welch. And one of the things I hear as I sit here, I hear Jack very clearly. In God we trust, everybody else bring numbers. I don't hear any numbers. I don't hear no numbers. I hear all about speculation in regard to what we're doing, but how are we going to create a budget if we don't backwards plan what the true numbers are and find out how we really have a problem? If you go on to the next page, landlord's compliance. After 6 months, if there's no compliance, no communication from the landlords, the house will actually be put under the rental inspection program. That just seems like it's a natural fit. I say 6 months because there should be, by that time, that landlord should have appeared to be able to talk to us or everybody, all the parties in regard to what's going on. That the current RIP fees that are assessed right now would immediately go into effect. Water bills could be cross-checked for compliance to make sure that everybody's in compliance with what the city wants to do. Future communications, this is the upside of our opportunity here. This is the crux of what we're talking about. The future, I'm gonna
Wrap it up, please.
yes.
Thank you.
The future protocol check is to be able to have a Zoom call and key stakeholders to be able to talk about, what current issues are going on with the police chiefs, with the police chief, landlords, so on and so forth. Be able to get to the end. We have wins on the backside of here, talking about how everybody wins within this. So this is what we want to do and what we're proposing, what we want to be able to work with the city on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Aaron Kotis. I'm the local landlord here. I just want to state, first of all, I'm not opposed to accountability. What I'm opposed to is the execution of the proposal here. Just tonight, we heard the city staff saying that they don't know how it's going to be implemented. To me, that's kind of terrifying to say we're going to roll forth with this proposal and not even have an idea of how it's really going to be played out. There, as other gentlemen have mentioned here tonight, there are ways to get around this number of how many single-family rentals are currently in Joliet, at least to get a reasonable ballpark number to start building a city budget from. You know, the water bills are one of them, tax bills are another. One thing I find rather telling is that I don't see any tenants coming to these meetings saying, hey, we really need people coming in here inspecting our houses so that we have a safe living condition. What I'm seeing is homeowners coming in and saying, you know, we need to offer poor people a decent place to live. So we're not hearing the people who are supposedly benefiting from this asking for it. We're hearing other stakeholders asking for it. And I've also heard many times that, you know, most landlords in Joliet are decent, but we have a handful that are not. And the city has also mentioned, I've heard mentioned several times, we know who these bad players are. So if they already know who the bad people are, why are we trying to use a hammer to solve a problem that could be solved with a tweezer? So finally, I guess my final concern here is how are we going to get these inspections done? The Housing Authority of Joliet recently transitioned their inspection program to a third party based in Tennessee. And my experience working with them so far has been an absolute nightmare. So these people have no idea of the local market conditions. There's more red tape, more automated messages, and it's impossible to speak to a human. If that's the end result of what we're proposing here, the city is not going to benefit. In fact, it's just going to drag everything down to a screeching halt. So my recommendation to the city would be, why don't we beef up the ability to add single families to the inspections for just cause? Why don't we beef up education for the tenants so that they have a better understanding of how to report when a landlord is not providing them with reasonable living conditions? And finally, we can beef up education for all the other residents, like homeowners in the city, so that if they find a problem with their neighbor, they know who to go to so that they can then get that problem addressed by city staff. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Johnson. I live in the city of Joliet on Black Road, and I've been a landlord for well over 30 years in Joliet. I remember back in the 80s, the city of Joliet was like a lot of cities, and they couldn't demolish the houses fast enough. But in the last few years, or the last 10 or 15 years, I really don't see the problems that used to plague us. I think the city's doing a good job the way they're already set up. And, you know, it kind of reminds me of a story when I was in grade school. One kid was acting up, and the teacher took and penalized all of us. And again, just like Aaron was saying, that, you know, once some houses should be put in the city rental program. Some landlords need that above their head to run a clean operation, but probably 90% of the landlords don't need that. We want our properties to stay in a good, so that we can get a lot of money for them, so we can get a lot of rent for them. Matter of fact, I've used the city system several times on neighbors to properties of mine, or people that were down the street, and neighborhood services were all over them within 24 hours. And graffiti was taken care of, yards were taken care of. Some were single family, some were multi-unit. The cost of this is, the cost is gonna go to tenants, not landlords. Landlords are gonna up their rents to make up for the cost. And the feedback I get from tenants just on multi-unit buildings is, why do I have to allow the city to come in through my place? You know, they feel violated. And most of them, everybody's got Google now, and most of them are savvy enough, because most tenants are younger, that they can figure out the city has a system for it. All right, I would like to see the money that you're gonna allocate, because it's gonna cost landlords, tenants, and the city of Joliet huge amounts of money. I'd rather see that money go into the city of Joliet infrastructure. You know, I know I brought this up at the land use meeting, but it's just sad. I see these statues that we paid over $100,000 for ripped down, and you see just the concrete and the rebar sticking out of them. City needs to do something with that. You know, I know it's unrelated, but that's money that we could be using instead of spending it for this. I know some crime does come from rented houses, but some crime does come from grandma's house. You know, the grandson, a lot of them aren't landlord related. And not always are we gonna go buy our property at midnight. I go by almost every one of my properties at least once a week to make sure it's being, you know, grass is being cut or whatever. All right, and one more thing I wanted to note was right now in the city and around, we're in a crisis mode. If I put a house up for rent, I have thousands of inquiries on that house. And now I've got houses, the oldest house I got is 1865. So some of these older houses, I know it's not just safety and wealth, it's improvements. The city wants you to improve this beyond all the neighbors. If you guys, a lot of you guys weren't city councilmen, but I was at the meetings when through neighborhood services, they made us put in all asphalt concrete driveways. But they made me do lots of improvements that all my neighbors didn't have. And I think that's unfair. But getting back to so if you imply this ordinance, I think you're gonna lose some single family rental houses. You know, I'm gonna sell some of mine because I know it's just gonna be too expensive to put egress windows in and to do this and to do that. You got a brick structure, you gotta put an egress window in. It's just it's just not worth it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Good evening, Mayor Ordekirk and council members. My name is Tanya Rand, and I am a resident of Joliet. I also happen to be a real estate agent, but I'm here as a resident of Joliet. I want to thank you for working with the Three Rivers Association of Realtors to consider what really this impact was going to be financially. And so that negotiation is appreciated, that you were willing to hear us and make the change and take out the annual unit fee. That does help a lot of the people who are trying to conduct business in Joliet. On the other hand, I'm still going to ask you to please consider what you're hearing tonight in all the unknowns, and to consider we really don't have statistics. Business cannot make a decision without an actual statistic. An estimate doesn't work for a return on investment. And let's just say that your number of 5,000 properties, single family unit properties, is accurate. But the reality is that's probably at most 1,000 landlords. 1,000 times 100 is $100,000. Now, we all know that a city job pays pretty well, and the inspectors, although not extremely rich, make a decent salary, and let's add benefits to that. So $100,000 is probably going to pay for one additional person. We already said this is going to be increasing almost 3 times the number of inspections that have to take place. If there are 25 inspections done a week, 5 inspections on single-family homes because you're driving from one place to the other a day, that's 25 a week. That's about 1,200 a year. You just said there were 5,000 rentals that have to be inspected. It's going to take 4 years to 5 years to run through that cycle, and that doesn't include the follow-ups. So getting something on the books to get it on the books is a political move. It's not smart. It may get someone in office, but it's not going to help the residents that you were voted in and asked to take care of. The reality here is that you've also said that there are a lot of properties that cannot be inspected by the city of Joliet. They're managed or owned by government agencies or paid for by government agencies. Read the inspection ordinance. Those are not included. And the reality is, some of those neighborhoods are where a lot of the violence is taking place. Some of those, not all. Heck, in my neighborhood alone, which has some rentals and a lot of homeowners, we've got equal problems. And yes, I use the view. So I really wish, A, that you vote against this ordinance and put it away and think about other ways that you can benefit. 3% of the rental units that are out there are causing the problems with violence and crime. 3% are the ones that get the calls to the city or the computer app to the city. Out of those, however many we have already. So I wish the city would focus, and the realtors are more than happy to work with the city, on education. Nobody should get a transfer stamp without understanding what it takes to own a home, and that it's not just paying your bill right then and there. And nobody should be allowed to be a tenant without understanding what your rights and obligations are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
I'd like to make a comment on some questions that were asked. Councilman Budron, you are correct. There is an ordinance in Joliet. If we have a drug house, a house of prostitution, people committing crimes, there's a list of them in that ordinance. I don't know if you read it or not. But anyway, that process is long, okay? And renters don't say anything because they're afraid of getting evicted. I've been in this business of Cuttingham Neighborhood Council for probably over 15 plus years. The stories you hear about the landlord not fixing plumbing or holes in the walls and stuff is true. When I rented out an apartment, I couldn't believe some of the comments people would say, well, you got a very clean place here. It's very nice. You ought to see some of the places we just looked at today. Not painted holes in the walls, et cetera. So you got to be kidding me. Landlords actually renting out these things like that? Oh yeah, it's going on. I've heard that personally from people. In some situations, my particular neighborhood is immigration status is the reason people don't speak out. They take advantage of that situation on these folks. In a city our size, it's shameful, actually, to not know how many rental properties you have, how many homes, single-family homes you're renting out. City manager just developed a program to cover city property. Nobody knew how much property the city owned, what buildings, what land we had, whatever. Again, third largest city, that's embarrassing not to have a handle on that. Like again, same thing applies for the single-family homes. And $100 for a landlord to register his property, if that's gonna break the bank, then maybe they're in the wrong business, because that's chump change when it comes to the profits being made off rental homes and rental apartments. So I ask that you do vote this in, because it's been a long haul, and for those people that don't have a voice, they're not gonna come here and tell you their horror stories, because their landlord will evict them, and it costs them moving out, deposits, the first month's rent, last month's rent, and so on, is high for anybody in today's economy. The highest inflation ever we've had, all the gas price, every utility's going up, they can't afford to move. So they shut their mouth and put up with those bed bugs that are leaky faucets and so on and so forth, but yet complain to other people. That's the real world, folks. You go out, live it, and see it. Thank you.
My name is Sharon Merwin. I'm a resident of the city of Joliet. Many of the comments I was going to say have already been mentioned by both sides of the aisle. To me, this should not be, the single-family rental inspection program should not be a showdown between neighborhood groups and subdivisions and landlords and real estate interests. Rather, it should be a wake-up call for certain not-so-responsible landlords and property owners to show up to meetings like this so they understand and comply with tenant responsibilities and property responsibilities. Again, there was a comment made, you know, if one kid acts up, then everybody gets punished. If there's no rental inspection program, there's gonna be more people flying under the radar. They know this is the back door. They know this is the way to sneak in. So rather than one kid messing up, you're gonna have more kids messing up. And we all pay. Tenants pay, landlords pay, real estate interests pay, neighborhoods pay, subdivisions pay. We all pay. So I just think going forward, to have a single-family rental inspection program is a wise choice.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, is there a motion to go into closed session to discuss personnel, collective bargaining, land acquisition, or conveyance pending or threat litigation, after which the meeting will be adjourned?
So moved. Second.
Been motion seconded to approve. Councilman Clement?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gavin? Aye. Councilman Guerrero?
Aye.
Councilman Hug?
Aye.
Councilman Morris?
Aye.
Councilman Budron?
Aye.
Councilwoman Coleman?
Aye.
Councilwoman Reardon?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Motion 20 out.